is the IELTS Listening Test. You will hear a number of different recordings, and you will have to answer questions on what you hear. There will be time for you to read the instructions and questions, and you will have a chance to check your work. All the recordings will be played once only. The test is in 4 parts. At the end of the test, you will be given 10 minutes to transfer your answers to the answer sheet. Now turn to part 1. Part 1. You will hear a woman phoning a travel agency about hot air balloon rides. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 5. Now listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 5.
Good morning, Smart Travel. Jason speaking.
Hi, good morning. I saw your advert in today's paper about hot air balloon trips. It sounds pretty exciting, and I wonder how much it costs.
Well, the price may vary depending on the location, number of participants, and add-ons. A single ride may cost you up to £280 per person, but if you choose group booking, there is a discount, and the cheapest flight is £125 each for a group booking of at least 10 people.
Oh, that's not too bad. What do you mean by add-ons?
They are optional items like taking photos for you during the ride, champagne, and sit-down breakfast after the flight. Upon completing the trip, we will provide each participant with a certificate, and that is entirely free of charge.
Can I book a ride over the phone?
Yes, that's an option. Reservations can be made 1 year ahead of your trip by telephone, but to pick a specific date, you must book online. A confirmation email will be sent to you right afterwards.
How high can the balloons go?
A hot air balloon's height is limited by the temperature of the air and how much fuel it can carry, and the highest altitude ever recorded for a ride is 1,800 meters, but most rides stay below 300 meters.
Oh boy, that's impressive. How long is a single ride?
The average hot air balloon ride lasts about an hour. The entire ballooning experience, which includes ground preparation, flight and post-flight packing up and celebration, may take 2 to 3 hours.
And what time are the flights?
Our flights generally meet about an hour before sunrise on the day. You will be notified of the exact meeting time the evening before your flight. Night flights are avoided due to weather conditions.
Fair enough. Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 6 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 6 to 10. Which month do you recommend for a hot air balloon trip?
Autumn is the best time of year to take the trip. Not only can you see the changing hues of the trees from above, but it is a great way to spend time with the whole family before it gets too cold.
I see.
But please note that our flight may be cancelled and you will be notified by phone the day before.
Why is that?
It can be quite dangerous to fly under bad weather conditions, like a thunderstorm. So our experienced pilots will not go under such conditions.
What should I wear for the ride?
We suggest wearing comfortable clothing, like a jacket. Multiple layers are always better. Wearing a helmet for safety concerns is also a good idea. Sandals are not permitted.
Can children or older people participate?
All children must be above the minimum age of 9 years old, and they have to be accompanied by at least a parent or guardian. However, an adult has no age limit as long as they meet the health requirements.
What exactly are the health requirements?
Participants must at least be in fair physical condition. For example, they shall have no significant knee, hip, or back problems, and no recent surgeries or broken bones. They must also stand unassisted for an hour during the flight. It is the required position during the whole flight. As the balloon comes to land, all passengers will need to adopt the landing position with knees bent in front of them.
Are those rides safe?
Hot air balloon companies are required to have a commercial balloon pilot license, and all our pilots go through rigorous training before they are allowed to fly. It is a relatively gentle activity. However, the impact of a balloon landing can vary drastically, depending on factors like wind speed. Sometimes it is similar to the momentum of jumping off a small chair. If you cannot jump off a small chair, speaking to your doctor before booking a balloon flight is best.
Thank you very much. I think that's all I need to know.
Thanks for calling. Goodbye.
That is the end of part 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers to part 1.
Section 2. You will hear a tour guide welcoming a group of visitors to the British Library and telling them about the library and what they will see there. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 15.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to your very own tour of the British Library on this lovely afternoon. My name is Tony Walters, and I'm your guide for today. Could I please see your tickets for the guided tour? I'd also like to remind you that any tickets bought today do not include a visit to the reading rooms. I'm afraid we don't do visits on Fridays, or any weekday during working hours, so as not to disturb the readers. But if you do want to see those rooms, the only day there are tours is on Sundays. So, I don't want anyone to be disappointed about that today. OK? Thank you. Right, we'll start with a brief introduction. As many of you know, this is the United Kingdom's National Library, and you can see that this is a magnificent modern building. It was first designed by Sir Colin St. John Wilson in 1977, and inaugurated by Her Majesty the Queen more than 20 years later in 1998. As you can see, the size is immense, and the basements alone have 300 kilometres of shelving, and that's enough to hold about 12 million books. The total floor space here is 100,000 square metres, And as I'll show you, the library houses a huge range of facilities and exhibition spaces. And it has 1,000 staff members based here in the building. So, you can appreciate the scale of our operation. In fact, this was the biggest publicly funded building constructed in the United Kingdom last century. It is still funded by the government as a national institution, of course, and it houses one of the most important collections in the world. The different items come from every continent and span almost 3,000 years. The library isn't a public library, though. You can't just come in and join and borrow any of the books. Access to the collections is limited to those involved in carrying out research. So it's really a huge reference library for that purpose, and anyone who wants to consult any materials that are kept here can formally apply to use the library reading rooms.
You now have some time to look at questions 16 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 16 to 20.
Right, well, here we are, standing at the meeting point on the lower ground floor, just to the right of the main entrance. I've given you all a plan of the building so that we can orientate ourselves and get an idea of where we'll be going. Now, outside the main entrance, you'll see the wide piazza with the stunning sculpture of Newton. The sculptor was Paolozzi, but it's based on the famous image by William Blake, and it's definitely worth a closer look. On the other side of the piazza from the statue is the conference centre, which is used for all kinds of international conventions. We'll take a quick look inside at the end of our tour. Looking ahead of us now, you'll see that we're standing opposite the staircase down to the basement, where you'll find the cloakroom, and to the left of that, we have the information desk, where you can find out about any current exhibitions, the times of the tours, and anything you need to know, if you don't have a tour guide. As you can see, on this lower ground floor, we also have a bookshop. That's the area over to the left of the main entrance. You'll be free to browse there when we get back to the ground floor. Now, opposite the main entrance on this floor, we have the open stairs leading up to the upper ground floor. And at the top of them, in the middle of the upper ground floor, you can see a kind of glass-sided tower that rises all the way up through the ceiling and up to the first floor. This is called the King's Library. It's really the heart of the building. It was built to house the collection that was presented to the nation in 1823 by the King. You can see it from every floor above ground. When we go up there, you'll find the library's treasures gallery on the left. Can you find it on your plan? That's the exciting one. So we'll be visiting that first, but we'll also take a look at the stamp display situated behind it on the way to the cafe. A lot of people miss that. The cafeteria runs along the back of the floor, and in the right-hand corner you'll find the lifts and toilets. Always good to locate them. The other main area on that floor is the public access catalogue section, and I'll show you how that operates when we get up there.
That is the end of Section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Section 3. You will hear a student called Joel talking to his tutor about his research into farmers' attitudes towards new developments in agriculture. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 26. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 26.
Dr. Owen?
Come in, Joel. Right, so how's your research going? You're looking at how farmers feel about new technology in agriculture, aren't you?
Well, actually, it's more general than that. I'm looking at their attitudes to a variety of new developments in agriculture.
OK. Have you got a title for the project yet?
I was thinking of something simple, like farmers' attitudes towards the adoption of new farming practices.
That's possibly a bit too general. I think the title needs to be a bit more specific. What kind of farming will you be looking at?
Well, that'll vary, actually. But I want to speak to each of the 10 farmers in my sample. So I've chosen farms which are all in the same region.
OK. Well, I'd specify where they are then.
Right. I'll amend the title to do that.
OK. Is there any particular reason why you've decided to do face-to-face interviews? It'll be quite time-consuming, won't it?
Yes, and I did consider doing telephone interviews for that reason. Especially as it's unnecessary for me to actually see the places where they work. It's just that, in my experience, a lot of farmers don't like talking on the phone. So they'll be more likely to talk freely if I see them in person.
Yes, you're probably right. Good.
Then the first thing I want to investigate is how the farmers actually find out about new developments in agriculture that they might want to adopt. What sources they use.
Right. So how are you going to do this?
Well, I could make a checklist of sources of information for them to look at in advance, so they could tick off the ones they actually use. Things like farming magazines, farm product advertisements, television and the internet and so on.
It might be more useful to ask them rather than show them a list. A spontaneous response to one or two open questions might give you a more accurate picture.
All right, I'll do that then.
Now, talk me through some of the other issues you want to cover.
Well, there's the way the government communicates with farmers.
Right, well, one thing is farmers complain that the government sends out the same information to all of them, whether they're poultry farmers or dairy farmers or arable farmers.
So they get all this information, but half of it doesn't actually apply to them.
Exactly. So you could look at that.
Right. Then I wanted to look at attitudes of British farmers to the cost of making any changes on their farms. According to articles I've read, farmers in Britain aren't, in principle, against investing money in new machinery and new practices, but they're actually just too busy to work out what the financial implications are.
Yes, and a lot of them don't seem to consider getting financial advice from their accountants about it either.
Right.
There's also been some research in Australia on sheep rearing practices. I can give you the reference if you like. Basically, it appears that the majority of Australian sheep farmers are willing to risk adopting new practices on the basis of just a few pieces of research. They don't usually wait until the evidence in favour of the changes is overwhelming. They're quite happy to act before then so they can get ahead of the game.
OK, I'll take a look at that. Thanks.
Before you hear the rest of the discussion, you have some time to look at questions 27 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 27 to 30.
We said we'd also look at some of the reading material I've been reviewing.
Yes, I had another look at Contemporary Farming Manual, which is clearly bang up to date. It covers a lot of things a farmer might want to know, but it's so dull.
Absolutely. I found it really hard going. And I can't imagine any farmer wading through it. There aren't even any decent pictures.
Did you have time to look at Running a Small Farm?
Yes, although I only read bits of it because, despite being entertaining, it wasn't very academic.
I know. And a lot of the information is either misleading or simply wrong. I'm surprised it got published at all. I don't imagine the farming press will rate it very highly.
You recommend agriculture and economics. I expected that it would be really difficult. The title's a bit off-putting. But I thought it was brilliant. So I've bought it.
Yes. Some people think it relies too heavily on farming practices in specific parts of the world. But the theories that underpin these are universal. And that's why it's a required textbook for anyone studying agriculture.
Right.
What else did you come across?
I borrowed How to Survive in Farming from the library. I thought it'd be interesting background and I liked the informal style. But it turned out to have been written years ago.
Yes, and like everything else, farming fashions have changed. So it's badly in need of a new edition.
Can I ask you a question about...
That is the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Section 4. You will hear a lecturer talking about the use of games techniques in business. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Today, we are going to look at how the phenomenon known as gamification has really exploded in recent years. So what exactly is gamification? It has been defined as the use of games thinking and mechanics in non-game situations, such as for business. Up to now, its most common function has been marketing. It is extremely popular with big companies, but as we'll see, it also has many other uses. Gamification techniques work on our natural desire for competition. One way they do this is by providing a reward, for example, badges or points, or providing a type of virtual currency. But don't be fooled into thinking the concept is a novel one. Just think of the frequent flyer incentive schemes that were initiated by airlines to try and retain customers. In fact, it's been around for years. However, it has become more prolific with advances in technology. So how is gamification being used? Well, it is seen as an excellent way of obtaining almost instantaneous feedback through common social media sites. However, there are other areas where it is increasingly being used, in particular as a means of trying to convince people through fun activities to alter their behaviour. Another use is in education or training in the workplace, especially when it is just not feasible to train people on the real thing. Good examples of this are the aircraft simulators used by pilots or the urban simulators used by town planners. So let's look at a few examples of the successful implementation of gamification. One perhaps surprising use of gamification has been in official campaigns by governments and authorities who have quickly seen its potential. In Australia, the government developed a smartphone app called MyFitBuddy, whose aim was to help people get off the sofa and exercise. The app provided plenty of motivational content to ensure people got the encouragement they needed to increase their levels of activity. Overseas in one city, instead of just punishing the drivers caught driving too fast, a local authority conducted a trial where they rewarded good drivers with free entries into a draw. The trial was so successful that it resulted in a 22% reduction in speeding. Gamification is also playing its part in helping people make healthy choices. In an attempt to get commuters to walk instead of using the escalators in an underground station, the staircase next to it was transformed into a piano. It had a touchpad underneath which played notes as people stepped on it. When it was in use, almost everyone opted to use the stairs instead of the escalator. Another example is a medical research company in Australia. They realised the potential of gamification to help the elderly recover much more quickly from accidents. When the elderly fall, the most common injury is not to the arm or the leg, but to the hand. So they took an already popular computer game which involved people smashing fruit and adapted it so patients could practice their fine motor skills in a fun way. Now, there are a number of things to consider when using gamification. First of all, there is no way it can work unless it is fun. In fact, without that element, it could have the complete opposite effect on the consumer. In addition, as companies are often obtaining a lot more personal information and data on their customers this way, they should always be mindful of their legal obligations in terms of legislation relating to privacy. So now, it's over to you to think of other examples of gamification that you might have come across.
That is the end of section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers.